An entire hospital's destiny can be altered by a single heartbeat on a monitor. Saving the life of a severely disfigured and unidentifiable John Doe was not an option for charge nurse Clara Evans. An oath was taken. However, she lost her badge and was hauled away by security when hospital politics and morality collided. The very people who have vowed to save lives have labeled you a liability. The administrators believed that the issue had been resolved. The quiet returned. 3 days later, a convoy of black government SUVs skidded to a stop outside the emergency bay, shattering the silence. And a Special Forces commander with battle-hardened skills emerged with one chilling query. The hospital administration would be brought to its knees by that. In Seattle, the rain didn't make things better. All it did was cause the Mercy General Hospital emergency bay's neon lights to flicker into warning yellow and blood-crimson streaks. It was 2 a.m. The name and spirit of the cemetery change on Tuesdays. Clara Evans fiddled with her scrubs' collar. They were normal issue and blue. However, they felt heavy tonight. She had spent 14 hours standing. Her eyes were bright, hazel and relentless as they searched the intake board, but her feet ached in her old sneakers. Clara had more than only nursing. She was the foundation of Mercy General's Level 1 Trauma Center at the age of 32. More than her own beating, she understood the cycle of life and death. Clara? Coffee? She looked over and saw Toby, the young nurse, handing out a lukewarm foam cup. When the codes arrived, Toby, who had just graduated from nursing school, was still hopeful but scared. "Thanks, Toby," Clara remarked as she sipped her drink. The caffeine was essential, but it tasted like burnt toast. "So far, the night has been quiet. I am concerned about that." Toby grinned and said, "Maybe the city is sleeping." "Toby, the city never sleeps. It simply reloads as though it were on cue." The trauma desk's crimson phone shrieked. The sound was like a dagger cutting through the muted hum of the emergency room. Clara quickly changed from a weary co-worker to a field general as she pounded down the coffee. She took hold of the receiver. "General Mercy. Evans is talking." Panicked and cracking was the voice on the other end. "ETA for arrival is 2 minutes. About a 35-year-old man without ID, gunshot wounds, many GSWs, and severe blunt force injuries. He was abandoned in front of a fire station. He is a programmer." Clara stated in a firm voice, "Copy that. Get Trauma 1 ready." After hanging up, she yelled commands. "Get the crash cart, Toby. We have a vital incoming, Dr. Trent. Unstable GSO." Dr. Nathaniel Trent raised his gaze from his tablet. He was using a real estate app while leaning on the counter. Trent was the type of physician who appeared impressive in a brochure but disappeared when the work got serious. He brought up the fact that he was a board member's nephew at least twice throughout a shift. "Psst," Trent grumbled, hardly moving. Probably a gangbanger dumped by his friends. "Clara, stabilize him and send him to the county if he is uninsured. I'm not going to spend my evening extracting bullets from a drug dealer." Clara said, "He's a human being, doctor," as she started to move in the direction of the bay doors. "He's also dying." The doors to the ambulance bay hissed open, releasing the stench of diesel and a rush of chilly rain. Grim-faced, the paramedics hurried the gurney in. The man was a complete mess on the stretcher. His clothing was torn, and he was drenched in blood and mud. However, Clara noticed something strange despite the filth. He wasn't dressed for the streets. The combat pants he wore were of a higher caliber than those found at military surplus outlets. And his thick, well-worn, businesslike boots. The medic said, "He lost a pulse twice on the way. He's threading, but we got him back." Clara ordered him to Trauma 1 now. As they rushed, she leaped onto the gurney rail and began compressions. The man's chest felt like a cage of fractured ribs beneath her palms. She examined his face. It was covered in dried blood and a thick beard, bloated and unrecognizable. They stormed inside the trauma room. Clara checked lines and hooked up leads with lightning speed. With her eyes fixed on the screen, Clara said, "Where is Dr. Trent?" The pulse rate fluctuated. "Tachycardia of the heart." "I'm here! I'm here!" Trent walked in, painfully slowly putting on latex gloves. He's going to be arrested again. "Nurse Evans, please lower your voice." Clara ignored his tone and replied, "He needs a chest tube now. On the right, there are no breath noises. Before you begin diagnosing, let me do an assessment." Trent gave a smirk. For half a second, he listened to the chest. All right. A tube's tension pneumothorax setup. The ER doors opened once again as Trent grabbed up the scalpel. However, it wasn't a medic this time. Patricia Gower, the administrator, was accompanied by 2 security officers and a young man in a silk suit who appeared to be in a panic. The operations director was Patricia Gower. She was a woman who saw patients as spreadsheets, with red representing loss and black representing profit. Patricia's voice was high-pitched. "Dr. Trent, give up what you're doing." With the knife just inches from the dying man's chest, Trent hesitated. "I'm undergoing an operation, Patricia." Patricia pointed to the young man in the silk suit and said, "We have a code VIP. Ethan Caldwell is this person. Our largest donor, Senator Caldwell, is his father. Ethan is in excruciating pain after hurting his wrist while playing tennis at the club. He needs to be attended to right now." Clara froze. She glanced at the dying man on the table, his oxygen saturation at 75%, his blood pressure falling, and then at the pampered man in the doorway, clutching his wrist. "You must be joking with me," Clara said. Patricia entered the sterile field in her heels and said, "Dr. Trent, on the phone is the senator. He wants his youngster to be seen by the top attending physician right now." Trent stared at the bloody, filthy, and probably impoverished John Doe on the table. He then turned to face Patricia and the prospect of political favors. He let the scalpel fall into the tray. "Nurse Evans," Trent remarked as he removed his gloves. An icy wrath ignited in Clara's stomach as she said, "Finish stabilizing this one. I'm going to attend to Mr. Caldwell." Trent dismissively replied, "You can't leave. This man has a collapsed lung and internal bleeding. If you leave, he dies. He's a John Doe." For Clara, most likely a junkie or a homeless veteran. Prioritizing triage is required per protocol. A top priority is Mr. Caldwell. A dying man is more important than a sprained wrist. With a scream, Clara moved ahead of Trent. Abandonment is what this is. It's malpractice. With a sneer on her face, Patricia Gower took a step forward. "Nurse Evans, this is an administrative order. You'll regret it if you stay put." A flatline tone started to blare on the monitor behind Clara. The heart of John Doe had stopped. The flatline caught Clara's attention. She turned to face Trent and turned to go. She glanced at Patricia's arrogant expression. "No," Clara said. Patricia blinked and said, "Excuse me." Trent dropped a scalpel, which Clara picked up. "I said no." Trauma 1's quiet was more oppressive than radiology's lead aprons. The flatline monitor's steady beep even appeared to falter. Patricia Gower's voice dropped to a dangerous pitch as she snarled, "What do you think you're doing?" Clara disregarded her. She avoided glancing at the administrator. She ignored the frightened doctor who was scuttling in the direction of the VIP. The man dying on the table became the only thing in her world. "Toby!" Clara yelled. The young nurse leaped. However, Dr. Trent left. Toby stumbled, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't care if the Pope went. Take over compressions. Don't stop until I tell you." Squeeze. Toby scrambled onto the stool and began pumping the man's chest. Clara grabbed the betadine bottle, splashing it over the man's ribs. She knew she was crossing a line. Nurses did not perform surgical procedures. It was the golden rule. If she cut this man, she was ending her career. But if she didn't, his life ended. It wasn't a choice. Security. Patricia screamed, "Take her away. She's attacking the patient." Two stout guards approached, uncertain, knowing Clara because she had prepared cookies for their night shifts. They paused for a moment, then turned to face Patricia before turning back to the dying man. "Don't you touch me," Clara said, holding the scalpel up, her eyes burning with a fierceness that caused the guards to pause. "If you stop me, this man dies. And I will make sure every news station in Seattle knows that Mercy General let a man die for a tennis injury. Do you want that on your conscience?" They remained still. Clara faced the patient once more. She has received significant training as a trauma nurse. Find the intercostal space, fourth rib, mid-axillary line. Additionally, she has seen this process 1,000 times. She inhaled. She cut. There was a hiss of blood and a burst of air. The pneumothorax releases tension. The man's chest heaved. "We have a beat." Staring at the display, Toby yelled. "Sinus tract. He has returned." There was no celebration at Clara. She reached for a chest tube kit and taped the plastic tube into the incision she had just made. The man's oxygen levels started to rise. 80%, 85%, and 90%. She picked up a stethoscope and paid attention. Sounds of breathing. He was breathing. Even though he was unconscious, she bent over him and whispered in his ear, "I have you covered. Tonight, you won't die by yourself. Not when I'm watching." She examined his pupils. They were slow but responsive. Her hand touched his neck as she moved his arm to check an IV line. She noticed a tattoo right below his ear beneath the beard and dirt. It wasn't a sign for a gang. It was a tiny, winged black trident. She filed it away even though she couldn't identify the sign. "Evans, nurse." It was a chilly voice. Clara stood up straight. Despite being critically ill, the patient was stable. She pivoted. Anger was shaking Patricia Gower. Dr. Trent had reappeared, looking largely vengeful, but also pale and embarrassed. Trent pointed a trembling finger at her and said, "You did unauthorized surgery. You're not a surgeon. That is battery and assault." Clara fired back, removing her bloodied gloves and tossing them in the trash with a wet slap, saying, "I saved his life because you were too busy kissing a donor's ring." Patricia remarked, "You're done," in an unsettlingly composed tone. "Leave." Clara stood her position and stated that he needed to be moved to the intensive care unit. He requires scans for interior injuries. Trent hissed, "We'll take care of the patient. This hospital no longer employs you." Again, Patricia ordered security. "Take Miss Evans, vacate the property right now. Call the cops if she doesn't cooperate." Clara gave Toby a look. The young nurse was sobbing in private. "Softly. Watch him, Toby," she murmured. "I will," Toby said. "Don't let them kill him." Clara made her way to the door. She halted as she went by Dr. Trent. He stood 6'2", and she was 5'5", but she was so much bigger than him at that point. "Nathaniel, you took an oath. Don't hurt anyone. Tonight, you broke it. Get out!" Trent yelled, his cheeks reddening. Clara didn't turn around. She left the trauma area, made her way through the busy emergency department, where patients gawked at her, and emerged into the chilly, wet night. Her scrubs were immediately soaked by the rain as she sat on the parking lot curb. She was trembling. A hollow pit of fear was left behind after the adrenaline subsided. She had recently lost her pension, her job, and perhaps her license. She was broke, unmarried, and 32. However, She imagined the air flowing into that stranger's lungs, and the heartbeat on the monitor as she glanced up at the flickering emergency room sign. Worth it, she muttered to the downpour. She was unaware that the man's hand was twitching as Toby wheeled the John Doe toward the elevator inside the hospital. She was unaware that the man she had rescued wasn't a vagrant on the streets, nor did she realize that she had just saved the life of the most dangerous man in the U.S. Special Forces, Captain Elias Miller, who was the younger brother of the victim. Clara has been gone for 3 days. They were a haze of inexpensive wine, sobbing on her couch while disregarding calls. She had previously received an email from the nursing board. There was an ongoing investigation. Mercy General was advocating for the complete cancellation of her license due to her extreme carelessness and unlicensed medical practice. They put her on a blacklist. She submitted applications to 3 urgent care facilities. Within hours, she was rejected by all 3. Patricia Gower had been meticulous. Clara had not simply been dismissed by her. The earth had been salted by her. The poisonous normal had returned within Mercy General. Bragging about how he dealt with the renegade nurse, Dr. Trent was parading around. The VIP, Ethan Caldwell, was prescribed strong painkillers he didn't require after receiving treatment for his sprained wrist that is often reserved for royalty. Captain Elias Miller, the John Doe, had been relocated to a 4th-floor semi-private room. He was still recuperating from the ordeal in a coma. He was registered as John Doe, indigent, since he had no identification when he arrived, and Clara had been fired before she could properly record the tattoo. Minimum care had been mandated by Patricia Gower. She had instructed the floor nurses to keep him alive while saving resources. We transport him to the state facility as soon as he awakens. They were unaware of his identity. They were unaware that his team's monitoring signal had been delayed because the military beacon embedded in his MIR had been broken in the ambush that almost killed him. However, the beacon came back to life on the morning of the 4th day. A satellite 200 meters above Earth received a single encrypted ping from it. A tactical unit now refueling in San Diego received a code red warning after the coordinates were transmitted by that satellite to a secure operations facility in Virginia. Major Jackson Miller's communications device chirped as he was in the middle of a briefing. For the first time in 10 years, his face, a roadmap of scars and stoicism, turned pale as he gazed at the instrument. "Sir," his tenant on the left said. Jackson muttered, "They found him," in a deep growl that sounded like grinding stones. "Elias was located. He's in Seattle. Is he still alive? The signal is faint. He is motionless. A medical facility." Jackson got to his feet and quickly turned the table over. "Prepare the birds. We are currently in the air." Mercy General again. It was the start of the morning shift. At the ER's front desk, Patricia Gower was reprimanding a receptionist for making a file mistake. The doors opened automatically. Patients, families, or paramedics were typically admitted through the doors. 6 men entered this time. Their gait was not that of a civilian. They moved in a V-shape, or phalanx. Instead of police uniforms, they were dressed in expensive military combat fatigues devoid of insignias. The room's temperature dropped 10 degrees as they exuded a deadly grace. Major Jackson Miller was at the V's point. He was 6'4" and full of intent and muscle. Even indoors, he wore dark shades and a hat tucked into his epaulette. His mouth was clenched so tightly that it could shatter glass. Barney, a retired police officer who worked as a hospital security guard, moved forward. "I'm sorry, gentlemen. Jackson didn't even slow down, so you can't get in here." He just strolled by Barney as though he were a ghost, with a hand that felt like a steel rod. One of the men behind Jackson pushed Barney away gently, but firmly. At the center desk, the phalanx came to a stop. The whole emergency room fell silent. Doctors no longer dictated. The patients ceased to groan. The black giants in the center of the room captured everyone's attention. Patricia Gower raised an irritated gaze. She repositioned her spectacles. "Am I able to assist you? This isn't a parade ground, it's a hospital. The passageway is being obstructed by you." Jackson Miller removed his shades. His eyes burned with a scary intensity, and they were ice blue. His hands were on the counter. Jackson said, "I'm trying to find my brother." Despite not being loud, his speech could be heard in the back of the room. Patricia sneered. "Captain Elias Miller. Tracking signal puts him in this building. We don't have anyone with that name. Even if we did, patient privacy rules would still apply." Jackson said, "I don't care about your laws. He's not doing anything. Here is where we found him." On his neck is a tattoo of a trident. Patricia hesitated. She recalled the report from the poor man, John Doe. She curled her lips slightly and whispered, "Ah, the charity case. The John Doe." Jackson's knuckles on the counter went white. "A case of charity? He arrived a few days ago. No ID." In an attempt to reclaim control, Patricia stated, "We've been keeping him alive on the hospital's dime. He's upstairs. He's yours to take. It will help us save money." Jackson gave his guys a signal. "You two guard the perimeter. You two head upstairs and find Elias. Go with them, medic." Jackson remained at the counter while his colleagues made precise movements. He gazed at Patricia. There was a problem. Before Elias vanished, he was aware of the severity of his wounds from the field report. Elias ought to have passed away. Someone had performed a miracle to keep him alive for 3 days. "Who treated him?" Jackson inquired. Patricia replied. "Dr. Trent was the attending," pointing to Nathaniel, who was flinching behind a computer screen. Jackson gave Trent a look. He noticed the pricey watch, the anxious perspiration, and the gentle hands. This was the kind of man he knew. Men like Elias were not saved by them. "You," Jackson said to Trent. "You stabilized a tension pneumothorax and repaired a ruptured subclavian artery in a trauma bay." "I supervised," Trent said. Jackson's eyes narrowed. He bent down. On the walk-in, my medic noticed the charts. According to the records, a field thoracostomy using a knife rather than a conventional kit was the original treatment. Combat medicine is that. Grit is that. Jackson surveyed the space. He noticed the nurses shifting uneasily and looking down. He observed how contemptuously they regarded Trent. "He wasn't saved by you," Jackson said. There was no question. "The person who truly saved him, where is he?" Patricia became agitated. "That doesn't matter." Due to insubordination, the employee in question was fired. The air disappeared from the room. Jackson rose to his full height, gradually. "Dismissed," Patricia said defensively. She disobeyed direct orders. She gave a non-paying vagrant precedence over a high-profile contributor. She was careless. "She's not here anymore." The room seemed to freeze, but Jackson's expression remained the same. "The person who saved my brother was dismissed by you." Since she was able to save him, she disregarded protocol. Patricia yelled. Jackson looked around the room. What was her name? "Quiet." Jackson let out a yell that shook the walls as I spoke. "What's her name?" Young Toby got up from the corner. He talked clearly despite his trembling hands. "Clara is her name," Toby remarked. "The greatest nurse this hospital has ever had is Clara Evans." Jackson glanced at Patricia, then back at Toby. He replaced his sunglasses. "What is her residence?" Clara Evans resided in a studio apartment in the Rainier Valley, a neighborhood that everyone labeled rough, but real estate professionals kindly referred to as up-and-coming. With a nursing wage and student loan repayment, it was the only place she could afford. Even this shoebox was going to elude her now that she was unemployed and had a damaged reputation. Her single-pane window was being pounded by the rain. Her crushing headache from the previous 72 hours was accompanied by an unrelenting drumbeat. Clara sat on the floor with cardboard boxes all around her. She wasn't just let go. They were erasing her. An hour earlier, her landlord sent her an email. "We are using your lease's termination clause because of the recent attention surrounding your termination and possible criminal charges." She hadn't just been dismissed by Patricia Gower. She had given a local blog access to the narrative, which framed Clara as an erratic nurse who had attacked a doctor. The headline stared up at her from the screen of her phone. After attacking the surgeon in the trauma bay, the nurse was dismissed as the angel of death. Clara's hands, which were normally steady enough to insert a needle into a failing vein, were shaking when she picked up a roll of packing tape. The sound of her tearing a piece of tape was harsh and loud in the silent room. "Continue knocking." The rap wasn't courteous. There were 3 loud, deliberate thuds. It was the kind of knock that required a response. Clara froze. She turned to face the door. "Who is it?" Her voice cracked as she called out. A husky voice rumbled in delivery. It was a falsehood. When Clara heard a lie, she recognized it. Patients attempting to conceal overdoses had told her plenty about them. She got up and grabbed a hefty brass lamp, her only weapon, saying, "Leave it on the mat." The voice said, "Open the door, please." "I can't do that, Miss Evans. I don't want to break it." He was polite, but the threat behind it was absolute. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Had Patricia sent the police? Was this the moment she was dragged away in handcuffs for assault? She took a breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened the door 3 inches, keeping the chain on. She expected a police officer. She expected a process server. She did not expect a wall of a man filling her entire doorframe. Water dripping from the brim of a black tactical cap. Behind him, 2 other men stood in the shadows of the hallway, their posture alert, watching the stairwell. Major Jackson Miller looked down at her. Up close, he was terrifying. A scar ran through his left eyebrow, and his jaw was covered in a day's worth of rough stubble. But it was his eyes that stopped Clara cold. They were the same shape as the man she had saved. "Clara Evans?" Jackson asked. "Who wants to know?" Clara gripped the doorframe. "If you're from Mercy General, you can tell your lawyers to talk to my public defender." "I have nothing to say to you. I'm not from the hospital," Jackson said. He reached into his jacket. Clara flinched, raising the lamp. Jackson moved slowly, pulling out a photo. He held it up to the crack in the door. It was a picture of 2 men in dress whites, smiling on a dock. One was Jackson. The other was the John Doe. "You treated him," Jackson said. "3 days ago, Trauma 1. Clara lowered the lamp slightly. "The John Doe. Captain Elias Miller, my brother." Jackson put the photo away. "Open the door, Clara. We need to talk." Clara hesitated, then unhooked the chain. If these men wanted to hurt her, a brass chain wouldn't stop them. She opened the door wide. "He's alive?" "I was concerned," she said, her voice softening. "They wouldn't tell me anything." Jackson stepped inside, his boots heavy on her cheap laminate floor. The 2 men behind him stayed in the hall, turning their backs to guard the door. The apartment suddenly felt incredibly small. "He's alive," Jackson said, looking around at the packing boxes. "Barely. But he's not doing well." "What do you mean?" Clara's nurse instincts overrode her fear. "Is he septic? Did the chest tube leak?" "I told them to watch for subcutaneous emphysema. Physically, he is stable. But he woke up an hour ago," Jackson said. He took off his cap, wringing it out in his hands. "He's agitated. Combat stress. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't trust the doctors. He broke the arm of a resident who tried to change his IV." Clara let out a small, involuntary gasp. "He's asking for the voice," Jackson said, staring at her intensely. "He says he remembers a voice in the dark. A woman who told him he wasn't dying alone. He won't let anyone else near him. He's ripping out his lines, Clara. If he continues, he's going to bleed out." Clara looked down at her hands. "I can't help you. I'm not a nurse anymore." They revoked my privileges. If I step foot in that hospital, I'll be arrested for trespassing. Jackson stepped closer. He towered over her. But for the first time, his expression softened. It wasn't pity. It was respect. I saw the security footage, Jackson said quietly. I saw you jump on that gurney. I saw you shove a scalpel into my brother's chest while a coward in a lab coat walked away. Clara looked up, tears stinging her eyes. I just did my job. You did more than your job. You went to war for him, Jackson said. Now I need you to do it again. I can't, Clara whispered. Patricia Gower, she destroyed me. I have nothing left. Jackson looked at the eviction notice on top of a box. He picked it up, read it, and crumpled it in his fist. You think Patricia Gower has power? You have no idea what power is, Clara. Jackson inquired, his tone tinged with evil humor. Patricia Gower is a bureaucrat. The 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment is led by me. I answer to the President and God. And sometimes I make the President wait. He tossed the crumpled paper into the corner. Pack a bag, Jackson ordered. Not for moving, for work. You're coming with us. But the police. Let me worry about the police, Jackson said. Let me worry about the hospital. Your only job is to keep Elias alive. Can you do that? Clara looked at the boxes. She looked at her empty apartment. Then she looked at the determination in Jackson's eyes. She felt a spark reignite in her chest. The same spark that had made her grab the scalpel 3 days ago. Give me 5 minutes, she said. Jackson nodded. We'll be waiting in the SUV. As Clara rushed to the bathroom to splash cold water on her face and tie her hair back, she heard Jackson speaking into his wrist comms. Base, this is Ogre. Assets secured. We are inbound to Mercy General. Tell the chaotic element to stand by and tell the governor to call the hospital board. I want Gower's clearance revoked by the time my wheels stop rolling. Clara grabbed her stethoscope, the one her grandmother had given her when she graduated nursing school. She put it around her neck. It felt like putting on armor. She walked out the door, leaving the packing boxes behind. The drive to Mercy General was silent and fast. The black SUV moved through traffic like a shark through a school of fish. Other cars simply moved out of the way. Clara sat in the back seat next to Jackson. He was typing furiously on a ruggedized tablet. Status update. Jackson barked without looking up. The subject is holding position in room 402, the driver reported. Hospital security is attempting to breach. He's barricaded the door with a bed. If they breach, he'll kill them, Jackson said calmly. Elias's threat assessment is elevated to 11 due to his confusion. Take a step on it. There was mayhem when they arrived at the emergency bay. The blue and red lights of the flashing police cruisers bounced off the damp pavement. A news team vehicle was getting ready. Clara felt sick to her stomach. Everywhere you look, there are police. Jackson stated, They're not here for you. My squad closed down the 4th floor, which is why they are here. The SUV screeched to a stop. Before the car had stopped, Jackson kicked the door open. He extended a helping hand to Clara. Remain near me. Don't stop moving. Don't respond to inquiries. Clara grasped his hand. It was warm and coarse. They started to move as soon as he pulled her out. They were encircled by a phalanx of 4 warriors who formed a moving wall of human iron. The automated doors were whisked through. There were shouting people in the lobby. Patricia Gower was shouting at a police sergeant while she stood in the middle of the room. I want those men taken out. This facility is private. You're giving terrorists permission to take a floor hostage. Patricia let out a scream. They've got federal credentials, Mum. the sergeant attempted to clarify. When Patricia turned around, she noticed Jackson. Then she noticed Clara. Her face contorted into a mask of pure poison, and her eyes widened. She gestured to Clara with a finger that was manicured. Patricia yelled, "You! Arrest her, officer! The woman is that. She is intruding." This whole thing began with her. After glancing at Clara, the police sergeant turned to face the enormous soldiers encircling her. He retreated a step. Patricia lunged ahead, obstructing their way. "Clara Evans, you're not leaving. Tonight, I'll put you in a... You bring shame to this line of work." Jackson came to a halt. The phalanx came to a complete stop. His attitude was one of complete disinterest as he gazed down at Patricia. "You are interfering with a federal military mission, Miss Gower," Jackson said. Patricia stamped her foot and screamed, "This is my hospital." She was also let go from her job. Jackson effortlessly corrected, "She works as a civilian consultant for the U.S. military. Additionally, this is not your hospital as of 5 minutes ago." Patricia gave a blink. "What?" "Examine your email." Jackson nodded at the tablet she was holding. Patricia cast a downward glance. She unlocked her screen, her hands shaking. Her face was completely devoid of color when she read the subject line. It came from the board chairman. Subject: immediate suspension while an investigation is conducted. Because of claims of egregious carelessness involving a patient of high priority and disregard for triage procedures. This is not possible. Patricia stumbled. "That's what Dr. Trent said." "Trent." Dr. Jackson cut him off, gesturing to the corner. Nathaniel Trent was being given his rights by 2 military police officers. The doctor was crying and pleading with them to give his uncle a call. In order to claim that he performed the treatment that saved my brother's life, Dr. Trent fabricated medical records. The digital timestamps were located. That is a hoax. It's also a federal felony. Because my brother is a federal officer, only Patricia and Clara could hear Jackson's whisper as he leaned closer. A distinguished captain who took 3 bullets for this nation was not given the same priority as a donor's son with a damaged wrist. The only person who had the moral guts to help him was fired by you. Miss Gower, you didn't merely lose your job. Your career came to an end. Move. Jackson commanded his soldiers as they swept by Patricia Gower, who was speechless and in shock. Clara experienced an adrenaline rush. As she passed the nurse's station, where her old co-workers were staring with open mouths, she maintained her composure. From behind a chart, Toby, the young nurse, subtly gave her the thumbs up. They arrived at the elevator and silently ascended to the 4th floor. The anxiety was evident when the doors opened. Hospital furniture obstructed the hallway. Jackson had 2 men on guard, both carrying weapons on their chests. "Write a report," Jackson remarked. "Boss, he's in there. He has a scalpel. Most likely took it off a tray. The next person who enters, he claims, gets it in the neck." Jackson looked over at Clara. "He won't allow me to treat him, but he won't harm me either. His wound has to be checked, and his IVs need to be reinstated." "He is delirious." Clara responded, "I can do it." She was no longer afraid. This was the task. She was destined to do this. Jackson said, "Go. We'll remain here." Clara walked over to the locked door. She didn't yell. She made no attempt to pry it open. She gently knocked. She spoke out gently. "Captain Miller." The sound of ragged, heavy breathing ceased within the room. A voice rasped, "Who is that?" It had the sound of gravel crunching beneath tires. "It's Clara," she announced. "I was there when you came in the rain. I told you I wouldn't let you die alone." A long period of stillness. Then there was the sound of a bed being pulled across the floor. The door opened slightly. Because he was awake and enraged, Elias Miller appeared worse than he had at the emergency room. His eyes were flashing, bloodshot, and frantic. His knuckles were white as he held a tiny surgical blade. His medical gown was ripped at the shoulder, exposing the new irate sutures Clara had inserted. He gave her a look. He looked at her hands, eyes, and face. He let go of the knife. "It's you," he muttered. Abruptly losing his power, he leaned against the doorframe. "I don't follow orders that get people killed," Clara replied, coming forward and holding him as he wavered. "You're the one who disobeyed the order." Despite being half his size, she guided him back to the bed by bracing him. "Are you going to bleed all over my clean scrubs, or will you allow me to fix this IV?" Elias laughed painfully and dryly. He winced when he perched on the bed's edge. "You're in charge." Clara helped him raise his legs onto the mattress and stated, "I'm a charge nurse. A component of the uniform is bossy." She took a brief look at him. His skin was clammy and his heart rate was really high. He was hurting and dehydrated. From the room's cart, she took a brand new IV kit. Her hands found the vein, threaded the catheter, and secured the line with experienced efficiency. She administered a little sedative and a saline bolus. Elias kept an eye on her the entire time. He didn't look dismissive like the physicians or predatory like the men in the bar. It was analytical, intense, and unexpectedly vulnerable. Elias whispered, "They said you were gone," his eyelids beginning to sag as the medication took effect. "The outfit? The woman?" "You're gone," she said. Clara smoothed the sheet over him and said, "I'm back." "Jackson?" Elias glanced at the door and asked. "He is standing outside, watching the door." Elias closed his eyes and nodded. "Excellent. They are afraid of him." Clara acknowledged that she was a little afraid of him. Elias grinned. Through his beard, a ghostly smile appeared. "You are liked by him. I am able to tell. You were brought back by him." Clara murmured, "Slumber, Captain." "Elias," he corrected, his voice becoming barely audible. "Give me a call." "Elias." He dozed off. For a few period, Clara stood there listening to the monitor beep in a steady, powerful pattern. She had never heard a more exquisite sound. Behind her, the door softly opened. Jackson intervened. He glanced at Clara, then at his brother, who was sleeping. He noticed the calmness in the room, the new IV, and the calmed vital signs. "All right," Jackson said. Clara took one more look at the drip rate. "I am aware." Jackson stood next to her and stated, "Patricia Gower is gone. An emergency meeting is being called by the board. They want to offer you a formal apology, a raise, and your job back." Clara observed Elias dozing out. She reflected on how she had been cast aside by the institution. She considered Patricia's brutality and Trent's conceit. Clara responded, "I don't want it." Jackson's eyebrows went up. No. Clara looked over at him. "Mercy General is a company. I've had enough of businesses. My goal is not to make money, but to save lives." Jackson responded, "Good," as a gradual smile appeared on his face. It completely altered his appearance, turning him from a combat machine to a man with a strategy. "Because I'm offering you something different." "What sort of offer?" "Private medical contractors, specialized care for valuable assets, stress management skills, the ability to make difficult decisions, and a disregard for politics are all available to the military." Jackson gave her a card. It had a gold trident insignia on a black background. "The salary is 3 times higher than what you earned here. The hours are bad. The places are hazardous. However, You won't have to deal with bureaucrats ever again. I am your boss. Clara accepted the card. She touched the imprinted logo with her thumb. When should I begin? She inquired. According to Jackson, you already did. Nurse Evans, welcome to the unit. It had been 3 weeks since the Mercy General incident. However, Clara Evans thought she had lived for 10 years during that period. Seattle was no longer her home. At the moment, she was at the Roost, a black site safe house that Jackson's squad had transformed from an abandoned cliffside radar station on the Washington coast. In sharp contrast to the antiseptic odor of the emergency room, the breeze here was strong and smelled of pine and salt. Clara changed the portable oxygen concentrator's flow. She noted the chart on her tablet and declared that the oxygen saturation on room air was 98%. Elias, you're recovering more quickly than any person has a right to. Shirtless, Captain Elias Miller sat on the cot's edge. His torso was a map of violence, with ancient silver scars from a life in the shadows, fading yellow bruises, and the angry red line of the thoracostomy scar where Clara had saved him. He grimaced a little and flexed his right arm. Elias said, "It's the cooking," and grabbed his shirt. Living in tight quarters with the Miller brothers and their squad had been an adjustment. Army rations don't taste like your lasagna. Clara grinned, experiencing the familiar flutter in her chest. Weapons were cleaned at the dining table by these noisy, deadly men. It was different with Elias, though. In the storm, he was the calm. Clara teased, "Don't get used to it," as she examined the dressing on his side. Elias took her hand and said, "Once you're cleared for duty, I'm going back to whatever my job is now." Despite his rough, calloused skin from rope climbs and trigger pulls, he had an exceptionally soft touch. His hazel eyes were serious as he glanced up at her. "You're part of the team now, Clara. Jackson trusts you. I trust you." He paused, his thumb brushing her wrist. "And you saved my life. In my world, that creates a debt that can never be fully repaid." "You don't owe me anything," Clara whispered, her pulse quickening. "I owe you everything," he corrected. The moment was shattered by the heavy metal door swinging open. Major Jackson Miller strode in, his face looking like a thunderhead. He wasn't wearing his usual tactical gear. He was in civilian clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, but he still looked lethal. "Break it up," Jackson said, though his voice lacked its usual bite. "We have a problem." Elias instantly shifted from patient to soldier. "Sitrep." Jackson threw a file onto the small table. "We know why you were ambushed, Elias. It wasn't just any cartel hit. It was a cleanup effort." Elias took the document. Jackson paced the little room and remarked, "The arms deal bigger. The phone you recovered before you fell was decrypted by us. There was no foreign national among the buyers. The buyer was a Delaware-registered shell corporation." Confused, Clara listened. "What does the hospital have to do with this?" Jackson faced her. "Everything. The majority stakeholder of the holding company that results from the shell company is a blind trust that is run by the Caldwell family." Clara's blood froze. Caldwell, as in Senator Caldwell, the VIP's father who suffered a wrist injury. Jackson gave a dismal nod in agreement. Richard Caldwell, a senator, is more than a politician. In order to destabilize areas where he has oil investments, he is covertly providing insurgents with military-grade equipment. Elias discovered the evidence. They attempted to murder him on the field for this reason. Elias continued, lowering his voice to a menacing growl. "And when he didn't die, General, they followed me to Mercy." "Exactly," Jackson answered. "An hour ago, we picked up a call. Clara, Patricia Gower did not simply terminate you for being petty. She was paid. She informed the senator's fixer that Trauma One had a John Doe that fit Elias's description. Ethan Caldwell was there for that reason. Due to a wrist injury, he wasn't present. He was present to verify the killing. Clara was ill. Suddenly, the young man in the silk suit's haughtiness made clear he had been more than a pampered brat. He was circling a carcass like a vulture. So, Clara said, we expose them. We deliver the FBI the files. We can't, answered Jackson. Tonight, the FBI director is dining at Caldwell's mansion. The corruption is widespread. We will all perish in a terrible training accident if we turn this over right away, and the proof will vanish. What then should we do? Elias stood up and asked. Despite his wince, he remained upright. Jackson said, we go on the offensive. Tonight, we're heading to Caldwell's estate. The physical server that connects the senator to the Shell Corporation must be secured. He has it in his own library. Elias said, I'm going right now. Clara pierced through the testosterone with her nursing voice. You're not cleared. You are barely holding your sutures in place. You will bleed out in a matter of minutes if you tear that artery open once more. Elias countered, I don't have to carry a ruck. I am able to drive. Overwatch is something I can offer. Jackson replied, No, Elias stays here. It's too dangerous. Caldwell will use every weapon at his disposal if he is aware that we are approaching. The main witness is Elias. He must live. Jackson gave Clara a look. You also remain with him. I'm leaving 2 guards at the perimeter just in case. But this place is secure. Elias whispered, I'm not a babysitter. Jackson firmly stated, You're the asset. Please hold him down, Clara. If necessary, put him under sedation. Jackson reached for his equipment bag. In 10, we move out. After us, lock the doors. Clara experienced a deep, nagging sense of dread as the group of black-clad operators loaded into the SUVs outside. She secured the bunker's massive steel door. The safe house was once again silent, but it didn't feel serene. The breath seemed to be held before a scream. It grew dark. Outside, the wind howled. At the table, Elias was cleaning a Sig Sauer P320 handgun. His movements were painfully rigid. Clara interrupted the silence by asking, You think they'll make it? Jackson is the best there is, Elias remarked without looking up. She was making tea, trying to keep her hands busy. But Caldwell is desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. Suddenly, the lights in the bunker flickered and died. The hum of the ventilation system cut out. The room plunged into pitch blackness. Power loss. No, Elias's voice was close next to her ear in the darkness as he approached softly and quickly. The generator has a backup, Clara muttered. Freezing. It ought to have started. The lines were cut. Clara heard the distinct click-clack of a weapon being racked. Get down, Elias whispered. Floor now. Clara dropped to the cold concrete. Stay behind the kitchen island, Elias commanded. Do not move until I say so. Outside, the sound of the wind was replaced by something else. The crunch of gravel, the heavy thud of boots. Not 2 men, but many men. Perimeter guards, Clara hissed. Silent, Elias said. They're already gone. A voice amplified by a megaphone cut through the heavy steel door. It was a smooth, arrogant voice. A voice Clara recognized. Captain Miller, Miss Evans, we know you're in there. This is Ethan Caldwell. You have something that belongs to my family. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. The VIP. The sun. Open the door. Ethan shouted, his voice laced with a cruel excitement. Dr. Trent isn't here to save you this time, and neither is your brother. Elias crouched beside Clara. In the moonlight filtering through the high ventilation slats, his face was a mask of stone. They watched the house, Elias whispered. They waited for Jackson to leave. It's a trap. What do we do? Clara, she asked, terrified. Elias pressed the gun into her hand. Do you know how to use this? I fired a Glock at a range once years ago. Point and squeeze, Elias said. I'm going to draw their fire. You cover the back entrance. You can't fight them alone. You're injured. I'm not alone, Elias said, looking at her. I have my nurse. Then a deafening boom shook the foundation of the bunker. The front door groaned as breaching charges detonated. Smoke poured in. The siege had begun. The bunker door exploded inward. Twisted metal screeching against concrete. Flashbangs blinded them, ringing in Clara's ears like a death knell. Elias fired 3 rapid shots, dropping 2 mercenaries in the smoke. But he groaned as his fresh sutures tore open. Blood soaked his side. We can't hold them. Elias yelled, shoving a backup pistol into Clara's trembling hands. He was fading fast. Clara saw an oxygen tank and a bottle of rubbing alcohol on the medical cart. Desperate, she taped them together, creating a crude bomb. She hurled it towards the breach. Shoot it! Elias didn't hesitate. 1 bullet pierced the tank. A massive fireball erupted, engulfing the mercenaries and shaking the foundation. Move, Elias commanded. They scrambled out the emergency exit into the torrential rain, slipping in the mud. They made it to the tree line before Elias collapsed, his strength gone. Go, Clara, he gasped. No, she refused, hauling him up. I don't leave patients behind. Suddenly, Ethan Caldwell stepped from the shadows, a suppressed pistol leveled at Elias's head. He wasn't wearing gear, just an expensive trench coat. The hero nurse and the broken soldier. Ethan sneered. My father sends his regards. He tightened his finger on the trigger. Clara Patient stepped directly in front of Elias, shielding him with her body, and raised her gun. You have to go through me. Ethan laughed cruelly, gladly. Crack. A single shot rang out. Clara flinched, waiting for the darkness, but she didn't fall. Ethan looked down, confused, at the red bloom spreading across his chest. He collapsed silently into the mud. Clara spun on the ridge above. Jackson Miller lowered his sniper rifle, flanked by dozens of FBI agents flooding the valley. Clara dropped to her knees, holding Elias tight as the cavalry descended. They had won. And that is the story of Clara Evans, the nurse who refused to let a hero die, and in doing so became a hero herself. It reminds us that sometimes the bravest warriors don't carry guns. They carry stethoscopes and a refusal to back down in the face of injustice. Clara lost her job, her home, and her reputation. But she never lost her integrity, and in the end, she found a love and a purpose worth fighting for. If this story touched your heart or made your pulse race, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Do you think he would have had the courage to stand up to the hospital administration like Clara did? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about real-life heroes, justice, and romance, make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.